This is Our Side of Addiction, the podcast. I'm Amanda Bork. Let's. Hello, welcome in. So glad to have you. I hope you're doing well. Today, I want us to talk about relapse, why it happens, and what we, as the family members, the loved ones of addicts, need to know. What's the information that's going to be beneficial for our side of it? As you know, my younger sister, Jenna, she was an addict for well over a decade using heroin and then fentanyl. Of course, she eventually overdosed and we lost her. I currently facilitate meetings at an addiction rehab. I have that perspective of being the family member, going through the ups and downs, going through the rehabs and then the relapse and that continuous cycle. Absolute struggle just to get them in there for them to relapse. And then running my meetings at the rehab gives me that insider perspective on the rehab section of it, as well as the people with addictions, facing them and assisting them through that experience, but also hearing their side of what happened, what caused it. This helps the dynamic of the conversation and also the content that I'm able to fill for both sides. But today, your side, that's the side I'm focused on. Addiction is a struggle. And when we love an addict, there is this constant push and pull, this constant hope and then disappointment, this cycle of going into rehab and then relapsing. The relapse rate for opioids is like 92% within the first year. It's extremely high. I think alcohol is around 86%. It's very high for the majority of substances. The last study I saw was on marijuana. They didn't even do a 1 year study on that. It was 6 months. Like within 6 months, here's the relapse rate. A lot of them would return to using marijuana within the first 48 hours of leaving rehab. It's outstanding. And there's a conversation around why that's happening. It's a little difficult because it's a complex conversation. It's not one factor, it's several factors, and we're talking about individuals. It's going to be different for each individual. We do see patterns, and we can't help but wonder, does it have something to do with the programs that they're in? Could it be that? Because if we're relapsing within 48 hours of leaving, like, what did they actually even do in there? Did they learn anything in there? I will say that there is zero success rate in rehabilitation or recovery if the person is not 100% invested in it. And even then, it's difficult. We've all gone on diets. If you haven't, I better not meet you because I cannot be your friend if you've never had to suffer on a diet. We've all, hopefully, most of us have gone on diets and screwed up, failed. I've started some on Monday and by Wednesday, gorging on something. Didn't even make it a week. And you're like, screw it, I'll restart the next Monday. Or having those cheat days or having that slip. It's not that we don't want the change, don't desire it enough. sometimes we're just not in the best spot, or caught on a bad day, or feeling a little weak, or just in that habit of giving in to our urges. If my pattern is to consistently give in every single time my brain says, eat a Lindt chocolate, go for that Lindt, eat it, it won't be there tomorrow. If my pattern is giving in every single time that voice tells me to do that, I'm programmed to give in. The same is true, or I can say that's just a mild example. It's worse for addicts who are in recovery. Those urges are way deeper ingrained. And most of these addictions began before they were even teenagers. It's complex, it's complicated, but I give this example so that we can help to visualize it or understand, instead of being frustrated, pull it into an example of our own lives and help us to rationalize it a little bit. Not excuse it, but I want us to understand it, because it's very frustrating as a family member to experience the cycle and also watch the cycle. It's draining. And the more understanding and compassion we can have toward it, the better we can actually move forward together. On our side of it, when our loved ones relapse, it's devastating. All of our hopes and dreams just collapse. They come crumbling down. And you're frustrated and exhausted, but also each time it happens, you get a little more hopeless. And each time it just solidifies, this might never end. I might spend the rest of my life in this suffering, in this cycle. And being in that space of hopelessness, especially as it's connected to our loved one, is gut-wrenching. You finally thought it was over. You finally thought they were going to be different this time, or we were going to get through it. You might think, they promised, because an addict says that a lot. It's different this time. And even when I hear that in meetings where people say, it just feels different this time, they'll quickly follow that up with, I know I've said that before, but it really feels different. They will say that and they feel genuine about it. Who knows, though, if it's actually going to be different this time? They don't know, and you also don't know. All we can do is have a little bit of hope and optimism, but also keeping ourselves grounded so we're not too far floating in the air thinking this is all over and done with. And it's not just about disappointment. Trust could be broken because maybe they made you a promise. So our trust is broken further, if there's even any trust left in there. You might be lending out some trust that they are now in the negative with. That's dashed. All of our fears return. Fears of them being on the streets, them overdosing, them dying and never finding their body, them, I don't know, Lord knows, driving, getting into an accident, killing someone. Our heads just go to the worst places, very dark places. All of these fears are going to be resurrected within us each time there's a relapse. We start remembering our worst nightmares. Self-doubt starts coming back in. Is there something you should have done, could have done? Does this fall in your hands at all? You're going to probably take responsibility for certain things that aren't yours. That's going to be in there as well. Exhaustion. I mean, geez, you're so emotionally drained. There's just like nothing left in there. And that's going to be resurrected because there was a little bit of relief. They weren't on the street. You know, they weren't using, so they were safe. They were with professionals. They had medical care, maybe even medical staff. They were safe in there. You could relax. You could sleep. Now that there's a relapse, you're exhausted. That surfaces again. You're not sleeping. You're feeling sick to your stomach, not even being able to eat anything. Why is this so common? Relapse. Why is that rate so dang high? I want us to start realizing the true depth of addiction. It is chronic. Whether we are on the side of addiction as a disease or the side that's behavioral, because there's two models, there's overlapping on both models, and we might be in the middle a little bit, but it is a chronic illness, and it's definitely a lifelong illness. We know it's lifelong because there are many, many examples of people being over a decade sober and relapsing. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years sober and then relapsing. We know for a fact it's long term and it's chronic. That plays a huge role in why relapse is so common, is because this illness really stays with us unless we're actively maintaining that it's not. We don't want to use this as an excuse. Jenna, my sister, used to love using this excuse, and I understand that AA or 12-step programs, they say this as a benefit, but if we're using it in the wrong context, it's an excuse. She would say, I can't help it. I have a disease. Like, there's nothing I can do. I can't change it. I was born this way. That was her excuse as to why she couldn't change or she couldn't get help. And that goes according to the disease model, is I have a disease. There's nothing I can do about it. Like, I have diabetes. Like, I can't change that. Love to, but can't. Sorry. That's why I'm kind of in the middle of these two models in particular, partly because of my bad experience, but partly because of research and studies and programs out there, treatment programs. It's not an excuse. Whatever side you're falling on, we aren't using this as chronic illness as any kind of excuse. Instead, we use it as an opportunity to predict, using it as an asset of predictability. In addiction, a lot of things change biologically. Their brain changes. The chemistry in the brain alters. There's even regions in the brain that shrink. The brain is not normal functioning. And that's part of the frustration for families. Why can't you understand? Why can't you see how risky this is? Why can't you control yourself? Why are you being so weak? A lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that is contributed to the changes that are occurring in their body and in their brain. We will do an entire episode all about the brain changes, but I want to include this because this is part of the contributing factor as to why relapse is so prevalent. The brain takes 2 years, in order to fully heal from addiction and substance use. If your addict is constantly relapsing before that 2-year mark, the clock keeps getting reset. over and over, and it's frustrating for everyone. But their brain changes that occurred because of the addiction have not healed yet. That is a big factor as to why there's that impulse control issue, why there's cognition issues, why the emotional regulation isn't there, why they aren't adapting to stress and their stress response isn't normal, why they aren't, their reward systems in their brain aren't normal and they need these crazy activities to get their dopamine hit. You'll hear a lot of addicts in rehab, they think that being sober is boring. They find very little, if not zero, pleasure in activities that you and I would find pleasurable. Going to the farmer's market, reading a book, taking a stroll in the evening, going to the gym, cooking a nice meal, going to a restaurant. We find those things. Yes, they're not crazy exciting. We aren't bungee jumping, but they're pleasurable. We enjoy it. We feel satisfaction. For them, that sounds like torment because there's zero satisfaction, zero pleasure. It's so boring. Like, yawn. This is crazy. You guys are lame. That's how they view like normal lives. They think it's very lame and dull because their life is so extreme or had been so extreme, and the way their dopamine has been rewarded or distributed to them during the addiction, it's extreme reward for extreme behavior, and they're looking for that extreme. And if it's not that, for them, it's nothing. That's part of the struggle for them before that 2-year mark is life feels horrible. And if you've ever been through any kind of darkness, 2 years of just trying to get by is a lot of time. It's very hard to be patient for 2 years and feeling like life sucks, everything's boring, I'm not getting any pleasure, nothing is fun for 2 years. That adds to why we're relapsing is they just want to feel something. They want to feel that level that you and I might feel from going to a restaurant or playing at the beach. They want to feel that, and they can't feel anything unless it's extreme. Part of why we're relapsing is that they're still having cravings during this period of healing. Those cravings don't go away after they've left rehab. Some rehab programs are 30 to 60 days. They are not done with those cravings for a while. And when they're reintegrated into life, or even in those beginning several months of sobriety, those cravings alone are enough to draw someone back in, let alone cravings matched with impulse control, lower dopamine, no emotional regulation. You're just like, F it, I'm doing it. It's an uphill battle for them. It really is. And I want us to understand this so that we don't consider them weak. We don't only consider our side, our suffering and pain of the experience, but we can have a little more understanding for that compassion element for them. Relapse is not this proof of failure, them failing, a system failing, a program failing. Rather, it's an opportunity to investigate and strengthen. I had a meeting once, and there was a person in the meeting. He had done the program, got out, relapsed very quickly, came back in. And he was in the meeting, he was in a mood that day, and he was venting a little bit. And he said, You know what I hate? Had a relapse, come back in here. First thing they say to me, what happened? What do you think happened? I used. What do you think? Which he's already frustrated with himself. He's ashamed. He feels badly. Like, I know I messed up. I'm a failure. And it kind of feels like he's being attacked in that moment. To reframe that for him, instead, we say the reason why we have to reflect on that is so that we can identify the soft points or the weak points, and you can exclusively come back in here and strengthen the weak points. If you are good going to meetings and you're good connecting with your sponsor and you're good with your routine, the weak point was coping skills or maybe how to manage stress and frustration. We'll come back in here and only focus on that coping skills part. Like double down on that. And that's the reason for the question is we have to be able to reflect on the relapse so that we can fill the gap. What do you need additional support in? What needs adjustment? Maybe the skills that he learned weren't applicable in the real life. If you're only telling people to meditate and journal, that's not going to work in most situations. We have to be calm to meditate and journal. I mean, if my adrenaline is pumping, I'm not going to sit with a pen in my hand, and nor can I relax to meditate. It's not always going to be accessible. If I'm out and about, we're going to pull paper out of my shoe. Like, where's that going to come from? Just stop in the crowd and journal and meditate? We have to make sure the skills are dynamic and diverse enough for them to apply in various situations. And that's really one of the assets of having the relapse is them doing reflection work to figure out where the gap is or what their weak spots are so that they can strengthen them. But as you see in that story, it's a little challenging to get to that spot of reflection because they are so harsh on themselves. As devastating as it is for us, it's equally or more devastating for them because they know they told you it's different this time. And look at them. 90 days in, relapsed. They know they messed up. They're a failure. They feel like a loser. Head down, zero eye contact, just shame. They feel bad about what happened as well. Let's look at the process of relapse. It's not just a one-time thing, a spur-of-the-moment thing. There's a build-up to the process. And one thing you might look at is there's Dr. Marlatt. He does this model, relapse behavioral model. You might Google that. I can also do an episode just about that relapse model because it's very interesting behavior-wise. And the process, there could be many elements. Looking at it just emotionally wise, if we're isolating, bottling up emotions, poor sleep, poor self-care, there's this increase of irritability, avoiding support. That could also, all of those things can contribute to a relapse. I know one person at the rehab. He had gone through the program, was in outpatient, and then in the outpatient, they have to find jobs. He was trying for this job, struggling a little bit to get some kind of employment or maybe the type of employment that he wanted. And another person in the program seemingly got a job straight away and was sharing that he got a job right away and it was easy to get a job. I'm not sure what else was said or the context and tone of how it was said. But the guy who was struggling to get a job found it very frustrating and he perceived it as gloating. Like, this guy's rubbing it in my face that he got a job and I'm struggling out here. I can't find a job. What happened? He ended up relapsing. He built this whole scenario in his head. Whether or not the guy who got a job was gloating, who knows? But it's very easy to absorb or perceive things however we want. If we're looking for an excuse to relapse, that's a great opportunity to relapse. But it could just be him feeling bad about himself, him perceiving that more strongly than it probably was presented, and using that as an excuse or opportunity to relapse. The fact that he was stressed and frustrated was enough to relapse. Screw it. I can't find a job. Might as well go get high. They are so delicate. Sobriety is extremely delicate the first year. I really say that. The first year, it's fragile like an egg, and it has to be held gently and moved around gently. If we're going to walk on eggshells with an addict, it's definitely going to be in that first year where their sobriety is so sensitive and very easy to break. And it's because they're having to deal with so much internally and also externally. They have to change everything about their life and majority of things about themselves. Yeah, have you ever done that? Probably most of us have never done that. Sure, we've changed a few things. Sure, we've done an overhaul. But everything internal and external has to be different. It's frustrating, and that's very hard to change. And even though we're most of the time focusing on adults, these are adults who've never learned life skills. They've never walked through life sober, or most of the time they weren't sober. They've never learned how to manage emotions or stress, or how to communicate, setting boundaries, coping skills, regulating emotion. They've never done it. And they're struggling and they're frustrated because they also know, I'm an adult and I feel like a child. That's a very uncomfortable place to be for them. Part of that feeds into this quick and easy relapse in that first year, how sensitive it is. Then we have the mental relapse, mental tug of war. If we look at the cycle of addiction, the first 3 stages are mental. It all starts mentally. Us as family members, we tend to think that addiction is only the physical representation, the behaviors, the drug usage. We think that's addiction. And we think that if they aren't using or behaving in that manner, that the addiction is not present. Since addiction, the first 3 stages of the cycle are mental, a person cannot use for years to decades and be actively addicted. You will have no idea that their addiction is active because they're just stalling in one of those first 3 mental stages of addiction. That adds to our frustration because we don't know what's happening. We can't be of any assistance unless they communicate that to us. Most of the time, they're not going to tell you about it. They're going to think they can manage on their own, or it's better to keep it a secret. We will never know it's active, and we'll be beep boop bopping along in life, happy because the addiction is gone and my loved one is back and all is right with the world. Zero inclination that none of that is true. And that addiction is just waiting to pop off, waiting to be seen in the physical form. Let's talk more about this mental relapse, some things that are occurring. Cravings. If I'm craving pizza, you don't know. If I'm fantasizing in my head about whatever it is, whatever your little weakness is, I don't know what's going on in your head or what you're craving, salivating for. That's part of that mental. Them believing that they can handle it. That's a lot of why they don't communicate what's going on, because they actually believe they can manage it, handle it, or they call it white knuckling. It's just gripping and bearing and waiting for it to be over, thinking they have enough strength to just wait it out. It also involves planning scenarios involving using. Perhaps if I'm craving pizza, I might think, how am I going to get the pizza? Where am I going to order from? Is it going to be pickup or delivery? What credit card am I going to use? When am I going to go get it? That's part of it. We're planning the scenario of using, or if it's behavioral addiction, acting out. We are minimizing consequences. Like they might find out, they probably won't. Or kind of thinking about how they can shield from consequence, or if I'm found out, it won't be that bad. I can get my way out of it. Also, romanticizing past use. This is a big one. They might start fantasizing about a person they used to use with and thinking about the times they used together, what it was like, what they did, how fun and exciting it was. As part of romanticizing. All of that is happening mentally. And it could be quick, it could be slow, it could be one or two things, it could be the whole thing. But that alone, that mental part, that can cause a relapse. Just fantasizing about using or having an old person come up on their phone could trigger a memory and a fantasy, which feeds into a craving, which then feeds into planning. Boom, relapse. The good thing about this mental part is that they are, while they're plotting and scheming and romanticizing, they're still conflicted in their heads. It just is living in their heads. And they've crossed a line, but they haven't crossed the line, which is using. This part, the mental part, is the best moment for them to seek help. If they don't communicate with you, you won't know and you can't help them. The key here is for them to recognize what's happening mentally and immediately reach out for help. What stinks about this is most addicts will try to tell themselves it's not a big deal because it's just mental and I can work through that on my own. I'll have to learn how to manage my thoughts, obviously. So, this thought that's coming up, I'm not going to call someone and get everybody riled up because I have a flash of a thought. Like, that's crazy. It's easy for them to minimize what's happening here. However, that first year, I always tell them this first year, anything that's coming up, go have a chat with somebody. Your sponsor, group meeting, talk to someone, maybe an admin at your previous rehab, go to a therapist. We have to immediately respond because if we're letting these thoughts fester, these thoughts will then cause them to cross the line. It will feed into using because we start minimizing, rationalizing, and it gets out of hand very quickly. It can. That's what's tricky, is so easy to minimize our thoughts or to believe that we can handle it, but it's also the best moment to reach out for help and adjust yourself quickly because you haven't used yet. It's tricky. Really is tricky. I don't want to make a big deal of it, but I have to make a big deal of it if this thought is mentally there. And then, of course, the physical relapse. This is when they cross the line and we return to the using. At the point of this happening, there's no timeline. It could be weeks or months that we're in these other states of mind before we physically return to using. It could also be a day. I've seen people run through the cycle in just minutes or hours. There's no way of knowing when if they're gonna cross the line. But it's a process that happens before the physical using. For us, the only indication of return, maybe we're catching some behavior changes, but most of the time we're not going to know what's up until they cross that big line and return to the using. And then it's a guessing game. Are they going to get back into rehab quickly? Are they going to stay back on the streets for a while, for years? Are we ever going to restart treatment? It's devastating because it's all up in the air. And for us, we think it happened out of nowhere. Everything was fine. They were working, they were happy, they were going to meetings, they were nice and friendly, and then out of nothing, nowhere, boom, you start using again? The heck? For us, it's like a bomb. It just came out of nowhere. We had no idea it was coming. For them, it was building. Building. We get so frustrated because it feels like it comes out of nowhere. And there's all this back end that's occurring and we don't know, we can't see it. That adds to our devastation because the addict can actually feel that buildup. They know what's coming, whether they want to admit or recognize that's different. They feel the buildup. We don't. Absolutely, we don't. Let's get into some triggers. We've talked about some. I want to keep building on this list because it is so dynamic and individual, just allowing us to expand so that our vision, our scope of sight can be a little bit broader. First one I say is, okay, not in any order, y'all know me, but if there were an order, emotional stress would be top list. Emotional stress, during that first, I say 6 months, during that first at least 6 months is very difficult for them. Any kind of emotional dysregulation or spike in emotions, not belittling anyone, but for us to understand what's happening, think of them more like toddlers. We know that they call it the terrible twos and terrible threes. They're very emotionally dysregulated. They're trying to figure out how to manage these strong emotions that they have, and they don't have the skills yet to regulate. What happens is they're constantly screaming, throwing little fits. Jenna, my sister, she used to hold her breath until she turned blue or passed out. And that was her defiance or temper tantrum. It was a whole fiasco, like born drama queen. Some of my earliest memories of her are when she was turning blue, or we would have to smack her or shake her, bite her or pinch her to get her to breathe. It's crazy. But kids just throw absolute fits. I'm not a parent, but I see parents and I see their content online, and they show a video, their kid throwing an absolute fit, and they're like, "What did you do?" Like, "I didn't cut the sandwich right." Like, "I cut off the crust and they want the crust today," and they're screaming. Our addicts are going to have similar responses to the world because they're now experiencing it as a sober person. This is new world for them. They've spent a lot of time, if not most of their time, never really feeling emotion, never having to manage it or to sit in it. For them, it's very overwhelming because there's this influx of experience that they're having for the first time. They just don't have the skills. Therefore, any kind of stress or emotional dysregulation is extremely multiplied for them. For us, we might think, Jesus, that you're a 30-something-year-old person and you're flying off a handle on some teeny tiny little thing. The first inconvenience that you face, you throw a fit. Give them a little space and grace. They're trying to figure their way through this. And for us, if we can conceptualize them as terrible twos, allowing them to have that space and grace, which is exactly what we do with our terrible twos. We let them have their temper tantrum, and then we, if we're diligent parents, then return to them and help them figure out how to regulate their emotions, or reward them, or help them sort out systems to regulate or sit in it. And we also need to extend the same courtesy to our loved ones in recovery. That's just a top trigger. Any stress, like story earlier, that gentleman trying to find a job, that was a lot of stress. Yes, mental, but it was also emotional. I'm feeling frustrated, feeling annoyed, feeling angry. I don't like this bundle of emotion. Screw it. Let's get that emotion out of me by using substance. Another one, conflict. That contributes to stress, but any types of conflict can be a trigger. Shame, that's a trigger. I'm a screw up. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. They shame themselves very deeply. And if some kind of trigger spurs that, it can be, eventually, it can lead to relapse. Others include loneliness, It's said, not required, but heavily requested that people who are in recovery don't engage in any kind of relationships, either physical or emotional relationships, like lovers, for at least 1 year. A lot of either sexual encounters or romantic encounters are heavily linked to using. For that reason, it's also best, we can re engage in our behavioral issues that we're trying to change when we get caught up with a partner. Therefore, there is this element of loneliness. I mean, most of them have never gone a year without having a partner, and that can cause some feelings to come up. Boredom, like I said, that dopamine is not normal for them. They're going to get bored a lot. That boredom is a very common experience that they're going to have to sit through or sort through. Boredom alone can cause someone to be triggered. Ooh, here's a good one. And you might not think about this one either. Overconfident. What? No such thing, Amanda. When we're talking about recovery, there is such a thing. There can be this overconfidence that I know everything, I got this, I don't need meetings, I don't need to continue my treatment plan, I don't need therapy anymore. That was a great thought to have. Like, I don't need it. I'm good. This causes them to completely fall off their treatment plan and their maintenance. The second they believe they don't need it is the second that they're walking back toward a relapse. In whatever context that is, we want to have confidence in ourselves, our ability, being optimistic, but not so much so that we think we don't need anyone or anything, and we could do it on our own. That's very dangerous. Reminders of trauma is another one. This again is subjective because trauma is subjective. Most contexts, of course, there are things we all agree are traumatic, but beside that, certain people find certain things traumatic that others would not. Any kind of reminders of trauma, which, guess what? Family is a big trigger because family is a trauma reminder. A lot of addicts struggle to reintegrate with their families for this reason. It's that everyone in the family is the same and they're trying to be different. But because those family patterns are deeply ingrained and well established, it's very easy to revert back when we're in that reminder of trauma. And if you come from any kind of darkness or troubled childhood, you know. I also know in the past when I have had to return to places that I didn't want to go for this reason, like Jenna caused me to have to go back to these places. I hated every second of it because it reminded me of all my trauma, all my past experiences. I felt small when I was back there. I felt like I never left or I never changed. And it makes us feel like we revert when we visit family. Or they can quickly trigger us to revert. It doesn't take much because it's that was established during our childhood, our initial programming. It's very easy to revert back. And because of that, family is hard for recovering addicts And we'll do other episodes about family because we have to get into that. But big one. Relationship strain that could be connected to family, but doesn't have to be. If we're having arguments, if things are shifting in the relationship, I'm trying to change and you are not, but you're trying to have your claws in me, that puts pressure on the relationship. I know of a lot of people who get married during active addiction, then get sober, end up having to leave their partners because of this tension and strain on this tug and pull. One person wants to change, the other doesn't. And of course, any kind of life changes in general, especially anything major, any relocation, moves, jobs, maybe getting jobs or getting fired from jobs, anything that's major, could even be a death in the family, a birth in the family. These are all very common triggers. Stress just in general, because all of these triggers, they're causing some kind of stress response. And that does impair our decision making in a person who's addicted or trying to recover. We aren't removing responsibility. You guys know I wholly, forever and always advocate for individual self-regulation. Your job is to maintain you. It's not my job. I don't maintain your emotions, your state of mind, your ambition. That's on you. You keep that. We aren't trying to say that any of this is taking away their responsibility to regulate themselves. We are putting in perspective how difficult this experience is for them and how kind of framing how one small thing for you, or maybe one mild mid thing for you, is not that big of a deal, but for them, it's life altering, it's monumental. They just don't have the capacity yet. We want them to be building, to be moving through, gaining resilience, expanding capacity, but initially, it's just not going to be there. They're still in this state of vulnerability. The more we can understand that, the better aware we are and the better we can respond and give them that space. Let's talk about some misconceptions that we might have about relapse. Relapsing means that they didn't want it enough. They didn't try hard enough. They didn't actually make any changes or put in enough effort. I think sometimes that genuinely is the case because, like I said, they have to want it, really want it. And then they have to really put in the effort. It's not just wanting it, but then the effort aspect and then the maintenance aspect. Most of it, I'm going to say, is a combination of factors. Sometimes, yes, they didn't want it enough. My sister Jenna did not want it enough. Nope, never. Never, ever actually wanted to get sober. She never actually gave it a genuine try or had more than 6 months sober ever since she started using. That's not the case for everyone, though. There are people who genuinely want it and are putting real effort in, making real changes. I have seen firsthand in my group meetings people who come in and within 60 days, they look like a different person. They move different. They speak different. Just, you're thinking, this is there's some kind of holy intervention here because you are just different now. They'll leave, they'll relapse, and then they'll come back. It's a process. Most of them are not going to be successful on the first or even 10th try. It's not that they're lacking investment, it's other factors are involved, or they're not doing that reflection to figure out their soft points. There's more to it. Of course, biology is in there too. The next misconception: everything we did was a waste. Oh, I can't tell you how much I felt like that with Jenna. Every single time I thought we crossed the finish line, got her into rehab or got her to agree to rehab, and then it didn't work, or she would relapse, or whatever the case, she would disappear. It felt like I wasted so much effort, energy, emotion. Everything was an absolute waste of my time. It can feel like that for us. And maybe sometimes that's true. We did waste it because we didn't get any kind of result. Things don't just vanish because we put in effort. And they don't vanish because the addict puts in some effort. Our energy, our investment, money, it's never going to have been wasted. Because I'll tell you, hopefully you haven't lost your loved one, but if you have, all you're going to do is think about how you could have done more. Tried more, more effort, more calls. You could have done more. That's all you're going to think about, and you're going to beat yourself up. Even if you've done everything on the face of earth, you're going to feel like you should have did more. Our efforts that we're putting into our loved one, they're never ever wasted. The next one. If I handled things differently, none of this would have happened. Yes, we can absolutely contribute to the relapse of our loved ones. There's zero doubt in my mind. I will tell you family stories in another episode, but we contribute to their downfall. Yes. Am I saying that we take responsibility, or it's our fault, or we should feel guilt or shame? No. But we can't ignore the fact that we do have influence on our loved ones. Yet, all of this weight is not bared upon your shoulder. Back to responsibility. It's their responsibility to take care of themselves, to maintain their sobriety, to regulate their emotions, to go to their meetings. That's all on them. It's never actually going to be on you. It's not one person's fault, and it's also not one factor either. So it would be impossible for it to be any one person's fault, since it's multifaceted. And the last one I have on here, this relapse, it means that nothing will ever change. We're going to keep running in this cycle, this circle, for the rest of their life. It feels like that as a loved one of an addict. And it could be the truth. You might run through these cycles for the rest of their or your life. Just because someone has relapsed, no matter how many times it's happened, does not mean they didn't make any progress. Also does not mean what's in the future. We can't determine that they will never be successful just because they failed a few times. If you've looked up stories of highly successful people or people who have made inventions, you will see how many times they have failed. I've done groups at the rehab specifically about failure and why it's important, how we can grow and learn from it, and highlighted many people from history who have failed a lot. Is it Thomas Edison invented the light bulb? Has got a famous quote saying I think he failed like 1,000 times in trying to invent this light bulb. He kept failing and failing. And his quote is, "I figured out 10,000 ways on how to not make it work." Our failures, yes, they are painful, but there's opportunity for growth and learning, expansion in the failure. And just because you failed does not mean you'll never be successful. If you don't believe me, look it up. Look up how many times the KFC, the Colonel, how many times he failed. His strife. Look up all kinds of people's stories. What was it? The guy who started Starbucks, no one would give him a business loan. He went to over 200 banks, I believe. Tried 200 times to get a loan. And everyone said, no way. If he stopped trying, that's the indicator that he will never be successful. But he didn't stop, which is the indication that eventually there will be success. As family, as the loved ones, what should we not do during a relapse? Let's highlight this because I don't want us to make any missteps if it's possible, if it's in our control. Some of these might feel like the best response to a relapse or your normal response, which is fine. You're not supposed to know how to respond correctly. And you're also not supposed to respond constructively every single time. It's just not realistic. We are stressed. We are in fear and anxious and exhausted. But I want to add this so that we can expand and grow and have more awareness on our behaviors and the influence of our behavior. First one I got here, lecturing or shaming. You want to have your side heard. I get that. You want to be heard. You want to let out all this emotion that you're feeling, and you want to let it out at the source. That's not productive for them, though. They already know everything you're going to say. They already are highly ashamed, which is part of why they keep so much secrecy, is they're ashamed. They feel guilty. They already know what you're going to say. I don't want to be lectured. It's not necessary. It's not productive. You have these sentiments, which are valid and should be heard, but where can we put those sentiments if they're not to be directed at the addict? Put them somewhere, even if it's in a journal, but they don't need to be directed at the addict. Generalized statements. You always do this. How many times are you going to relapse? You're always telling me it's different, but it never is. Goes into, I don't say it goes into lecturing, but it goes into releasing your sentiments onto them. I get it, but not the moment. Taking over their responsibilities, especially recovery related, trying to take charge of their life, or become overbearing. I used to feel like this with Jenna. This was my initial response was, you've lost your privilege to manage your life. You've proven to us that you don't know how to do it, so we're taking over. Most of us will respond in this manner, and it's justified. Yet, removing their responsibilities, especially someone who has relapsed, is not the way to go. You want to make sure that they're taking full responsibility for all of it and taking action accordingly. There's nothing for you to actually do. All we can do is be supportive and be aware of our behaviors, go on our journey and level ourselves up. We can't take dominance over another person's life. That's us moving through the state of fear. I'm flushing that toward them, that fear. It's not productive. It disempowers them and causes them to have more shame. Not productive here. Being overly emotional or explosive, you might have those feelings. I say this all the time. There were many a time I wanted to break my sister's nose and see her blood because I was so pissed. That's just not going to be conducive in this environment of when someone is relapsed. All we do is push them away when we do that. What we really want, ideally, is for them to come to us immediately so that we can take corrective action immediately, composed action. The more we explode or be overly emotional, the less stable we feel to them. They're not going to come to us if we're unstable and not safe. Also, impulsive ultimatums. I always think of this more like coercion or manipulation. We don't need to give manipulations. We don't need to be manipulative or have that intense, impulsive response to them. Threatening them even. Sometimes there's an element of that. It's because we feel so intensely and we're so scared and broken that these emotions overwhelm us and just get ejected onto whoever's right there or whoever the source is. It's justifiable. Not the moment though. And then the other one I have is ignoring our boundaries. I'm always going to talk about boundaries. Making sure we're always upholding our boundaries and remaining rock solid on those boundaries. They do not budge. We aren't making special exceptions or believing it's a special circumstance and we have to do this, sacrifice the boundary for this moment for whatever reason. No. If your boundary is no active using in the house and they relapse, you're gone. Bye. You have to be cold like that. It's going to feel like you're a monster. You have to be. That's your boundary. Don't you dare move from it. And I don't care what they say. They're going to say, I'll go to rehab in the morning. I promise it was a one-time thing. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. How can you put me out of the house? It's late at night. I have nowhere to go. You want me to sleep on the street? You want me to get whatever they're going to say after that. They will try their best to manipulate you. I don't care what they say or how they say it. You're gone. If that's my boundary, that's my rule, is no using in the house, no active addicts in the house, and you relapsed, There are zero exceptions to that. If it's snowing, okay, let's say it's winter, it's cold, drive them somewhere and make yourself feel better. And I'm not even saying let them sleep in the garage. Like, drive them to another location. And that's it. Maybe pay for their night at a motel. Okay, that might work. But they're not in your house. Now that I said we just talked about what not to do, how can we be supportive? What do we do without going into that enabling territory? Danger zone is enabling. Always and forever, the danger zone is enabling. It gets cloudy because it feels like love, it feels helpful or productive. It's not. It's a red zone. What are some things that we should be doing then, Amanda? Tell me. Encourage them to return to treatment or get some kind of external support. If that's through a therapist or a sponsor or admin at their last rehab, they have to get back into treatment or get support, targeted support. Encouraging that. Maintaining our boundaries is what we're going to do. Whatever you stated was your boundary remains. Just because we're going through hard times does not warrant abandoning the boundary. It defies the purpose. There's zero purpose if they're not upheld during the difficult times. Another way is expressing your concern without attacking. Can we do it calm, in neutral zone, tone? Can we do it with language that is compassionate and open? Can we use I statements? I feel like this. I'm hurt. I'm so disappointed. I don't know what to do. How can I support you? That type of a language. Staying consistent. We aren't being reactive. Part of our journey is learning how to be stable and consistent. We want to make sure them relapsing is not pulling us into reactive zone or conflict zone. We're going through a difficult time right now. We're having a hardship, but stability is only useful when we're in the hardship. We have to stay stable. And also protecting your well-being. You have to be safe. You have to maintain care of yourself. You have to make sure that the others around you, your other family members and whatnot, are also safe and taken care of. We aren't sacrificing ourselves because they had a relapse. That's part of taking their consequence away from them, isn't it? If we start jumping in there, all hands on deck, yes, be supportive. Yes, encourage a return to treatment, but we aren't sacrificing self for them. What are some examples of how enabling might look under this context? Covering their consequences. There are going to be consequences when someone relapses. And you are not to intervene with those consequences, whatever they are. If that means part of the conditions of your loved one's bail or release or minimized sentence is that they're sober or that they're in treatment, you're not protecting them from that. Maybe that means they have to go to jail. Allow it. The only way we're going to really learn is when we face the consequence of our action. That actually helps them build a library in their heads to be used later on. One of the biggest strategies when mental aspects of addiction are surfacing for an addict, especially in recovery, is to play the tape, they call it. If I use, that's going to happen, then this, then that. If I use again, I remember last time I relapsed, had to go to jail. My God, I had the worst time in jail. It was horrible. And then after that, I had to go on probation. You want them to acquire these consequences, and those can be used as assets later on to help them stay in alignment. That's one of the most beneficial uses for the consequences. You don't want them to feel that. No, we never want our loved ones to feel the pain or face consequence. But it's an aspect of life that's mandatory. We all have to face our consequences. Jumping in during a relapse and shielding them just because they give you a sad story or puppy eyes is enabling. And that means you're in the red zone, my friend. That's a no-go zone. Another way this enabling might be presented, providing money or access in it of any sort, access to money. This includes gift cards, clothing, any kind of gifts. It might even include food, groceries. If you're sneaking someone, illegally sneaking over some, what is that called? Food stamps, whatever it's called now, something, initials, EBT or something. Is EBT debit card? I don't know. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Any kind of government assistance, money, given that, shuffling it over to them, whatever you're doing that's providing resource to them is enabling what they just did, almost supporting the relapse and lessening the likelihood that they will return to rehab. Yes, that's what it equates to. The more we enable, the less likely they'll go back into treatment because they'll feel like they don't actually need it. Ignoring patterns is another part of enabling. You might not assume that because it feels passive. If I just look the other way, I'm exhausted, I can't face this, I don't have it in me to admit that this is going on or this happened again. That's enabling. If you're not against addiction, actually genuinely against it, then you're for it. There's no middle territory of, oh, I'm just being passive in this. No, that means that you're for addiction. I want us to have a very black and white perspective of that. What end are you on? Are you against it or are you for it? Because there's no middle. To help us bring awareness to our actions. And then the other one I have here is absorbing any kind of chaos. Maybe you also mediate some chaos. That could be one. Or allow the chaos, facilitate it to be in your environment or any other environment in general. We want to make sure we're not doing any of these actions and that we are consistent in being against addiction. Otherwise, we're just intensifying the relapse. We're intensifying staying relapsed, staying in active use, making it worse than it really needs to be. What are some other ways that we can respond to make sure that we are staying stable, we are grounded and rooted? Perhaps that means pausing before reacting. If you have a little bit of a quick tongue, or what do they call that? Like poison tongue. Can you pause? I really want to lecture right now. I want to yell at them. I want to get into a physical fight with them. Can we pause? Take a beat. This ensures that we aren't so dysregulated or we re-regulate ourselves. Can also acknowledge the impact that the relapse is having on us and being honest about that. It's not supposed to be always directed at our addicts, but we have to acknowledge it within ourselves and process that experience. Could also mean asking for support. Maybe that ties into your acknowledging and being honest, is then asking or seeking your own support. You do need support, and we want to make sure we're seeking that out or going to those places. We could be reevaluating boundaries, that might be one. Did I uphold my boundaries? Am I? Do my boundaries feel applicable? Should I alter them in some kind of way? Am I being too lenient, too tight? Sorting that out and just having a quick look at your boundaries. Those are some really great ways that we can check in with ourselves during this event of relapse, because there's a huge impact on us. We're allowed to be hurt and angry. We're also allowed to step back, to recenter ourselves, to find compassion for ourselves. Rather than being self-sacrificing, how can we be self-serving in this moment of hardship? Because there's a huge amount of self-blame that we feel during this. There's anger and shame, hopelessness, also grief. You're grieving. This relapse keeps happening over and over. You're grieving the fact that maybe it will never end. Maybe I'll never get my loved one back. Maybe nothing will ever be the same again. There's a lot of density there. And it is experienced as a loss for us. Yes, they're here physically, but they're also not, because they're sucked into addiction. And that's very real. And because of those emotions and that experience, we have to be caring for ourselves and being compassionate with ourselves while maintaining safety for ourselves. Remembering that progress or process of addiction through recovery is not going to be a straight shot. We love to think that it's a straight shot. If I could just get them into rehab, it's all over. We've won. We won against addiction. It is done. I can sit back, or I can have my life back. Doesn't work like that, because addiction is, what did we say at the beginning? Chronic illness. It's lifelong, long term, forever and always. We want to have that in our mind. It will always be present. They will always have to maintain it. Because it's lifelong, it's not just get them into rehab and it's over. We have to understand that it's deeper and more serious than that. There's a lot of back and forth. The relapse rate is astronomical. 92% in the first year. And every time we relapse, we're restarting that clock. Is a lot of back and forth. But having this deeper understanding of the severity and the long, what is it called? the depth of addiction. And of course, the more we understand the corrective action that's necessary when we do face these setbacks or hardships or even life changes, because as you remember, huge life changes can trigger a relapse, us understanding the corrective actions helps us in the process, but also is supportive of our addicts. And thinking that relapse is the opposite of recovery is not the correct thinking. The correct thinking is relapse is part of the process of recovery. Just about all of them are going to do it. It's extremely, extremely rare for someone to only go to rehab once in their life. Extremely rare. I've never met someone, I've never heard of anyone, never come across that story. It's very, very rare. If we can understand that we're going to be in the majority part of that statistic, that helps us understand that it's a normal part of the process. And our response, instead of being despair or hopelessness or thinking this is the end, we have to restart. Understanding that it's the process helps us minimize our feelings of despair within that. Us having that fear of disappointment, this fear that we're doing something wrong, even the fear of hope, they're not going to be assisting in the situation of a relapse. It doesn't bring us clarity. It doesn't make the situation any better or easier. Okay, let's put a bow on this, y'all. Putting a bow. Let's face it, relapse is absolutely heartbreaking. It's exhausting. You can't help but lose hope. The more we understand addiction and also relapse, the better we are to protect ourselves, to respond clearly, to be a pillar in the crisis situations, to stay grounded and rooted in reality, and to also stop personalizing it. We do that a lot when we love an addict. We redirect all the focus back on ourselves. We caused it. We're supposed to fix it. There's a magic word I'm supposed to say. I'm supposed to be perfect. We make it about ourselves. Rather, we want to depersonalize this experience through gaining that insight, that foresight. We aren't rescuing them. We also don't need to punish them. We don't have to disappear or make ourselves small or put ourselves in danger. Rather, we give our loved ones the grace to navigate this situation and understand that relapse is very normal and part of the process. And in addition to that, actually, you know what? That's all I got for y'all. Tricked ya. I'm always tricking ya. You always fall for it. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks for being here. Ciao, ciao.